Good evening and thank you. Welcome to the Scarborough Board of Education, Thursday, February 1st, 2024 board meeting. Can we call the attendance, please?
Sure. Mrs. Gammon,
Here.
Ms. Castellanos,
Here.
Mr. Kelleher,
He's been excused.
Ms. Leong,
Here.
Mrs. Lindstrom,
Here.
Ms. Tarpinian,
Here.
Mr. Peeny Huff.
Here.
Ms. Leisure,
She's been excused.
and Mr. Shumway.
Here.
Perfect. Thank you. Can everyone please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance?
And to the republic and a nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Perfect. Agenda item 4.0 is approval of minutes from the January 18th, 2024 workshop and business meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All right, so can we call the vote, please?
Yes. Mrs. Gammon,
Know how to whack.
yes. Ms. Castellanos,
Yes.
Ms. Leong,
Yes.
Mrs. Lindstrom,
Yes.
Ms. Tarpinian,
Yes.
Mr. Peeny Huff,
Yes.
and Mr. Shumway.
Perfect, thank you. It's unanimous. Agenda item 5.0 are adjustments to the agenda. Do we have any adjustments?
No adjustments.
Perfect. Agenda item 6.0 is public comment. Is there anybody wishing to make public comment this evening? Seeing none, I will close public comment. Agenda item 7.0 is the Spotlight Award. So I'll turn this over to Jenna.
I'm very excited to present this one. Okay, so this is the January Spotlight Award. I know that we're in February, but due to timing, it didn't quite work out for January, but we're still counting this as our January Spotlight. So the January Spotlight Award winner is keep going. Miss Allison Avery. Congratulations. We got more coming up. So yes, so Allison Avery was nominated in a couple of categories for leadership, exceptional work, being inspirational, setting high standards for students in classes, and VEX. And then this was a nomination that was made in 2023. So, well, March of 2023, so almost a whole year ago. So it read, educational practices every day that allow for a safe, challenging environment that has each student going beyond their comfort zones that will involve risk-taking, adaptability, and fortitude to achieve success. A role model for all students, regardless of backgrounds, belief, sex, or religion. Incorporated new ideas in curriculum, Genius Hour, that helps kids focus and engage in topics normally not taught in high school curricula. Also directed 2 teams to championship wins and a trip to the World Games in Dallas later this year. So hold on, keep going. So let's find out who the nominator is. Carrie Cortez. So in the process, we discovered that Carrie has retired. So we asked for, yeah. So we asked for help in other ways. And we have a video to show you. And can you turn up the volume as much as? If it makes you feel any better, this is my second time crying now watching. And many thanks to Mr. McCormick and his crew of students for all of this work. Do you mind coming up to receive your award?
Do you want to? Yeah. Yeah, did you want to say anything? No? Well, before you leave, does anybody else want to say anything? I feel like that video is a hard act to follow. That was really
Yes.
beautiful. That was really beautiful. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think it's hard, you know, I always say I sit on this side because teaching seems terribly hard to me, and especially teenagers, right? They're usually not the most thoughtful. Like you don't always think of them as being thoughtful at that age. You think of them as being a little bit more selfish, but that's really incredible. That's really, really incredible. And that's a true testament to you and what you're doing at the school. So thank you very, very much. That was unbelievable. Yeah. Have a wonderful evening and thank you for coming
Congrats
in
again.
and congratulations. Thank you. All right. My goodness. All right, agenda item 8.0 is the superintendent's report. So we'll turn this over to Jeff.
All right, well, I get to follow that up with a little budget process summary for January,
Perfect.
which I know everybody was looking forward to. So I'm going to make this as exciting and engaging as possible. No, just some bullets, in particular in January. What's that? I know it's your world, so you're gonna, now I'm not knocking you down. This is January is a very busy month for the leadership team in particular. So just a couple of bullets about what we've been up to since the new year. So first, the first week in January was really about building-based budget meetings and getting input and staff input from at the building level, and then bringing that all together, continuing our enrollment and staffing analysis and completing that. And then we got our first drafts of this year's Ed 279s. I think it was like the 15th or 16th of January. So right about in the middle of January, so that we can understand and be able to accurately predict what our state subsidy is going to be. So we have Kate's busy working all of those numbers so that we have everything that we need as we proceed. And then we've been meeting weekly and individually too with principals and all of the departments to really go line by line and review each budget line to see where we are, look at FY24 and forecast in 25, see if there are places where we can save, places where we might need to spend a little more, and really go line by line in each building and in each department. So we are almost, or maybe now, completed with that. Did we finish that today?
One more tomorrow.
One more. So we've got one more department meeting to go through all of the lines. So that's pretty wrapped up. And then we've been meeting weekly to go review and prioritize new proposals for this year, and are coming closer to a K-12 prioritization of new proposals for this year. and starting to put together the budget book and then prepare for March, which is a very busy month with our board workshops and as well as the joint town and school budget presentation, initial presentation. That's right at the end of March. So it's a busy month, but we're getting through it and it's been great. It's good.
Wonderful, thank you. Were there any questions for Jeff? All right, let me look at, okay. Agenda item 9.0 is the chair's report. I just have a few things, but the first thing I need to say is just because especially Colby, I don't want you to think I used the wrong word. I said selfish. I meant like a little self-centered, like focused on me. I just wanted to say that from the at the start. I used the wrong word. So I apologize to you as the teenager up here at the tables. Okay, just a couple of things. First off, I attended the regional school board meeting, which we don't actually typically get to attend because they tend to fall on the same night as our board meetings. And so this was an anomaly that it was on a Monday and I was able to attend. And it's really an opportunity for the regional boards, school boards to get together and kind of talk through what they're doing and how that might differ from others. So they went through a suite of policies and essentially were it's hung around for quite a while on public comment, that the policy around public comment and how do people, how do other districts do it and how do they allow community members and non-community members to provide public comment? Some, and essentially, everybody has access to the same model policies, but some are nuanced depending on where you are. And, just like we change ours, other districts do the same. So there is a lot of discussion on that. And so we actually didn't get to discuss much more than that, as we spent a lot of time there. So the next one is, I think they were kind of, they didn't book it, they didn't schedule it, but they are looking to continue to do it. So hopefully they will be on again, like on nights, they'll continue on nights when we can attend. Anybody's welcome to go. Yeah, so we'll wait and see. We'll wait and see the next one. The second or third thing is our workshop at our next meeting, which is the 15th. We are working, Jeff, Diane and I are working through potentially doing a cybersecurity workshop. The other one, when I was perusing our list, just the running list I keep of topics for workshops, one other one that struck me as pretty interesting given the budget and the reevaluation and things that are happening in our town is there was a request to have a workshop on explaining the state funding formula and how it is that we receive money and what does that mean for our budget and what does that mean for community members. So, but we were thinking, or actually Diane had a great idea. Maybe we push that back a little bit as it gets closer to when we're really in the throes of the budget. So that's kind of where we're looking at going, perhaps cybersecurity that we have to firm up and then talking more about the state funding formula. And the next one. Yeah. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention Jeff. We received as everybody up here knows, we did receive a resignation letter from Jeff yesterday. The community is seeing Jeff's letter to them, but I would be remiss if I didn't thank you tremendously for all of the support you've given this district. I think that you are a tremendous leader and your new city is going to be, our town will be so lucky to have you and we are going to miss you tremendously. So thank you for everything that you've done and you brought. It's been a fast 3 years.
I'll say, thank you.
It's been a fast 3 years. So thank you. All right. Anybody have anything they want to say or ask?
Just to Jeff, thank you for all of your hard work. I'm a little bit sad, but I'm also very happy for you. But we wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
Wonderful. All right. Agenda item 10.0 are committee reports. First, communication. So back to you, Jenna.
Hey, so we last met on January 11th. It's when we chose our spotlight winner that we presented today. And then we also discussed the update from town council on our joint discussion, which I'm going to give you the update on now. So we had a joint council corner live. So I was there, Jillian was there, and Shannon was there, along with Counselor John Anderson, Don Cushing, Don Hamill, and Jean Marie Katerina. So there were also 31 other participants within the community. And it was in person only. It was not recorded due to the format of the meeting. It would have been very hard to do that logistically because we actually had two facilitators there, Dana Morris Jones and Janice Cohen, who donated their time. So they facilitated this conversation for us entirely for free for the town. So that was thank you to them. And we broke up into small groups and then we kind of mixed groups together to kind of have these conversations about how everyone voted for the school and why everyone voted that way. And I thought it was a very fruitful conversation. It actually took me by surprise. You know, what we saw as a board, we thought maybe we had very polarizing thoughts and beliefs about our school and what we need. But then it turned out through conversation, a lot of us were more alike than not. And it was nice. It kind of maybe de-escalated everyone on both sides. And then we're kind of now in this realm of maybe we can actually work together through this. So the feedback was they liked the format, the community liked the format, and maybe we can do more of these in the future. And we'll see where it goes from there, but I thought it was very helpful. And I think the next go around, we're going to try to make it so that everyone can access it online or in some sort of hybrid format. We're going to do our best to figure that out. But the notes on there, I don't think it's up yet, but they'll be up soon. Just because there were so many of us and putting in all the notes from all of us, it just takes a little bit of time to get it together. So the next meeting for us will be February 8th, 2024. Sorry, I gotta update that.
Perfect, thank you. Are there any questions for Jenna? I too thought that the Counselor Corner Live was really good. And I've heard from a few people that participated, offhand, just offhanded conversations that it was interesting that, so the way that the groups are broken out is if you were a very strong, like you were an absolute yes, you were like in the 7 to 10 range. If you were thinking it through and weren't quite sure before you vote, or when you voted even, you were in the like 4 to 7 range, 4 to 6. And then last was the 0 to 3. And the comments I've heard is that even the people in the 0 to 3 and the 7 and 10 had things in common. And so that was really insightful, I think, for everybody in the room to your point, to understand that we're not quite as different as we think, and we're not so far apart as we might have seen thoughts on the surface. Yeah, it was really good. All right, thank you. And you're gonna just carry on with curriculum.
So our last curriculum meeting was actually canceled, but then Katie Vitro presented the assessment data to the board at the most recent workshop. And our next meeting will be February 13th, 2024.
Is there any questions for Jenna? John is not here, so I am going to hope, Carolyn, I didn't ask this ahead of time. May I put you on the spot, and would you mind talking about long-range planning?
Okay, I'll just read through his notes here. So basically, a lot of the discussions surrounded the upcoming needs for the school infrastructure. So John has noted up here, high school roofing, that's going to be tremendously expensive. One that's coming our way. The bleachers in the auditorium in the high school. Seems like we're constantly doing heat pumps. And we always want to do pave Quinton Drive to get to the middle school. It's It's always a goal. So a lot of repairs and maintenance that are coming our way that are significant that we need to be planning for. And then it's really hard. He's in a difficult spot right now with planning. We don't know what the new school solution is going to be or if it will be. So it's really hard to plan ahead. What do we do with the 3 primary schools to keep them up and running? Do we invest in them? Do we not? So just really trying to walk that fine line so we don't spend good money for something that's not going to be under our purview in the long run. So Todd has a pretty difficult job there, but he, as always, does a fantastic job. Todd and Kate are working to identify items for the capital budget this year, and that will be presented to the board and the town council. Yeah, and he's got here as well, something that was predominantly mentioned quite a few times. The longer we go without a solution, the more money will be thrown towards these buildings where it's just going to be a lot of money to keep them up and running. So that was the gist of the meeting. Did I miss anything? I think, yeah, you both were there, right? I think that was the gist of it. Thank you, John, for the notes.
Are there any questions for Carolyn? All right, thank you. And you're up again, finance.
I'm up again. It went really small print. I had a lot to say. I'm gonna have to read it from here. I am, unfortunately. So on bullet point number 2, we met on the 22nd. Bullet point number 2, Jeff has already covered very well as to what they're doing so far on the FY25 budget. I'll talk more to the FY24 Q2 financial results. We're 50% through the fiscal year, and we've spent 49% of the general budget. So we're pretty much right on track for where we expected to be. Some notes that Kate called out was special ed continues to be challenging to fill the ed tech positions. So we're getting very creative with how we're filling those, and some of it's through outsourcing, and some of it's through increase in the level to a teacher level position to meet the needs of the school and of the students. We had an increase in professional development during the summer, so we have improvement of instruction is slightly ahead of budget. And then instructional technology, Kate was mentioning, falsely appears below budget, and it's just due to timing of when the costs hit for salaries. They'll hit in Q3, and it's the way it's budgeted. It looks like it should hit now, but it hasn't hit yet. So it's just an entry Kate will make shortly. Facilities and maintenance, just continuing issues with finding custodial help. And so again, getting creative and outsourcing these where we can. General fund revenues are about 95% collected, as we would expect. The majority of what's outstanding is state subsidies, and that's right on par at collection of about 50% so far. All other funds, including capital projects, are tracking as expected. When you remove the new school placeholder that we had in there, we spent about $2.25 million on a budget of nearly $3 million. So, and a bulk of that work is done during the summer. So that's why, it's not the 50% marker that we look for on the operating side. Moving on to the budget, just going to the last bullet there, it's just save the dates on your calendar. We have budget workshops coming up on March 18th and 19th. And our next meeting is going to be on March 4th.
Perfect, thank you,
Anything?
Carolyn. Yeah, is there any questions for Carolyn? Did Kate happen to talk, or did you happen to talk in the meeting about the expense of using contracted services versus hiring our own?
We didn't necessarily talk to it, but are you speaking to, is generally it would be higher?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, because those are 2 of the 3 that were contracts that were.
Yep.
I'm sure Frayla will speak to it in a minute, but those are 2 of the contracts that are on the books to be
okay.
negotiated. And so when you, in my mind, I'm thinking, I remember the last time we negotiated ed tech contract, the ed tech contract, the starting step was, you know, it's hard to attract talent
Mhm.
when we're not, when the pay isn't commensurate with
Yeah.
what we're asking for. And so I
Mhm.
wondered what that looked like with contracted services.
Hmm.
So if, in other words, if we just bumped up, you know, if we were looking to bump up those salaries, would we be actually be spending less than we would have we would spend on contracted services?
Yeah, we said we're outsourcing with a lot of it's, is it Maxim?
We actually only have a couple of
Couple.
ed techs that we're doing contracted services for. You know, what we've done, is more kind of creative problem solving. So, for example, you know, in some cases, taking two ed tech positions and combining those into a teacher position.
Mm.
So not, you know, not filling an ed tech with a teacher salary, but, you know, doing some, creative solution finding or hiring a behavioral specialist in some cases, but certainly, finding ed techs is, a very universal problem in the state
Mhm.
right now.
The
Not-
Same with the maintenance too?
Yes, yeah.
Did you?
Would you consider, just out of curiosity, I wish I'd asked this in our finance committee meeting, would you consider that, is it salary related or just not a lot of people going into the field? Any thoughts or insights into that?
Definitely think it's a little bit of both.
Yeah.
So, you know, we've been as area superintendents and assistant superintendents trying to find as many different ways, for, pipelines into education. And so one of those things that we're doing is, you know, working with USM to have high school graduates get into teaching and get, Ed Tech 1 certifications right out of the gate, get certified, get classes for free, that kind of thing. So there's, you know, we're expanding stuff on that side, which is great. I mean, that's obviously not a short-term fix, but increasing, you know, starting wages for ed techs as well is definitely helpful.
Yeah, and I don't know where the maintenance in the custodial facilities and maintenance.
Yeah, I mean, that's, you know, if you're contracting out, you know, like an ed tech service, like with or student support, that is, typically significantly more expensive than if you were to hire your own. With facilities and maintenance, it's a little different. I mean, Todd's really smart about, what he's contracting out. And so in some cases, it may even be about the same cost, if not a little less, depending on the, you know, the cleaning services or what you're actually contracting out and when.
That's interesting.
But
Yeah, and in custodian, like in custodial services, like we're also only contracting out after like we have expended like all of the opportunities that any of our existing custodians want for overtime.
right.
So, you know, so that is definitely offered first. And then looking to see what's left, but there's just simply not enough hours in the day.
To get all the
Or
work done.
for people to, you know, they can take as much overtime as they would like, and there's still so much work to do. So it's a challenge for sure.
All right, thank you. Hmm. Any other questions? Okay. All right, well, I think that teed you up perfectly.
Yeah, I did. Thank you. Negotiations. So we held our first meeting to establish meeting norms on January 9th. Some follow-up meetings were scheduled. They were not confirmed, and so they have not been held as of yet. I just want to say from the board's perspective, we are eager to get started. We are ready to move forward to negotiate, and we would like to have been started already. But we will await a opportunity when it presents itself in order to get started with that.
Are there any questions? In the past, it has been the board's desire to negotiate contracts and have them wrapped up by the end of the school year so that teachers and staff leave the school year with an understanding that they have something firm in place for the next year. I just wonder, is the SEA aware that that's our goal? That you, to your knowledge?
I believe they are aware that it's our goal. It has been made, it's been communicated a number of ways and a number of times that we would like to be started and we would like to have started negotiating already. But they have just not been able to get to the table and confirm dates with us. So we will continue to try in our utmost. We can definitely work on some ways to make us have meetings, but at this point, I think we are clearly communicating that we are ready to go forward and
Yeah, it's
we,
gonna be tight because
Yeah.
we're, you know, obviously we're in February now, but June is gonna be here before we know it. Yeah. Okay. All right, thank you, Frayla, and you can carry right on.
policy. So we are continuing to go through policies and you will see the wrap up of the last A policies to go through tonight for kind of a refresh. And then we've gotten underway with the B policies. We'll keep moving through those. As I said last time, what we're looking at tonight's on our left-hand side. On our right-hand side is the upcoming policies, which is really all the B policies that we're gonna hit. And we'll work through those as we can at our next meeting. We'll meet on February 5th at 4 o'clock. It's a hybrid meeting and people are welcome to attend.
Awesome. Thank you. Are there any questions for Frayla? All right, and one more time, you and Jillian.
Okay. DEI committee, we had a really, really great presentation at our last meeting. It was fantastic. The data subcommittee, so the DEI committee has some subcommittees that are working. And one of them is a data subcommittee that was based on our prior charge that instructed them to look at data. And so we, as a committee, were sort of struggling with what data to look at because we didn't have any data to look at. And so what that committee chose to do was to pull all the data from equity audits that have been done at school districts throughout the state of Maine. Equity audits are kind of an in-depth review of a school. You usually pay for the service. They're quite costly. They run in the $20,000-$30,000 range, so they're very expensive. But what they do is they look at school, they make recommendations. And in this case, what the committee did was get all the data they could find from school districts throughout Maine, close neighbors, faraway districts, and then just sort of pulled together a list of common themes. So, sort of like different recommendations and different sort of, again, common themes that came up through all the audits, and sort of just presented those as a list, and then also the common recommendations that were made through those equity audits at other districts, and sort of pulled like the top 5 recommendations. Sort of the idea being, this is likely not something that we're gonna be able to budget for ourselves, but is there any way we can look at around the data and pull some commonalities that might be relevant to this district? And so as a result of that, they've identified some questions that they're gonna work on, but they presented that, and that was really just it was an interesting overview, and it was kind of a novel way to approach data that's available, that's public, but that's not our own data. So it was really, actually really interesting. We still need to fill 2 more seats, a community member and a staff member. We are working on that in the membership subcommittee, but not having a lot of interest, and there's a lot of committees looking for membership right now. So we need to find those folks. And finally, I got some preliminary feedback on the charge that was voted on and adopted last meeting that was very positive, but I'm really looking forward to bringing that to the full committee to get their feedback, which I will, or Jillian will tell you next time.
Jillian and Leanne are the school.
Yes, yeah. Well, I discovered my slides gone. I don't know what I did or what happened, but I remember the points that I have.
Perfect.
So, well, first of all, there's a survey that I think that you talked about at the last meeting. It's just about
Mhm.
ready. It's with the company now, right? The survey, the research company.
Yeah, they, so we sent our draft questions over, Carolyn, it was Carolyn, myself, Counselor McGee and Counselor Scyther, along with Jeff, Diane and Tom, put together about 2 pages of questions, and then, you know, not including demographics, and we have sent them over, to the company to kind of clean up and adjust and put into the format that they would send out the survey. And so that work is done. So we are in the process right now of just going through and making edits. So hopefully by tomorrow that'll be sent back. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and so that, when that comes back, that will help inform the committee. The committee is, the application is live. It went out in the town newsletter today. And has been going out in other areas on social media, in the district newsletter, social media, so on and so forth. So, we have a lot of applicants, 49 as of this evening.
51 as of right now.
Oh, okay, all right, okay, well, so, chairs will have their work cut out for them,
Yeah.
but, so anyway, we're gonna be sending out a, some information to all those that have applied. We are hoping to be able to get a meeting scheduled for the 12th at 6 PM, hoping for the public safety building. We're waiting to confirm that information. That information will be going out, was just discussed today. But so that's happening. We will, at that first meeting, we are hoping to establish norms, elect a chair, a vice chair, 3 at-large members, and then the 4 elected officials, 2 board and 2 town councilors appointed to the committee will be on that. The leadership committee, who will be basically setting agendas and keeping meetings going in an effective way. There's a lot of work to be done. So there's just a little over a week left to apply, and we've had great success, a lot of interest so far. We're all very excited to get the ball rolling.
All right. Any questions for Jillian? It sounds like the public safety building is going to be a good choice with that size.
Yes, and so, we'll get a Zoom link and we'll, get the equipment ready as well. So that, should anybody need to join online, but it will be a public meeting like any other.
Perfect. All right. All right, our liaison reports. Does anybody? Oh, the preschool? Did you?
I'm sorry, yes. I'm still a little shaken by my slide, but, all right. So actually I have 2, I have one for the council as well. So, we, I think, met again since the last time I mentioned this, but Diane and Jeff and staff have crafted an MOU for the pre-K and working on finalizing the application as of right now, right? So hopefully that will be going out in the very near future. We'll hopefully get a quick turnaround from the state on that. So that is to get the pre-K up and running that we've been talking about. And then, do you want me to, anybody else? Is it just?
Yeah, you can keep going.
Okay.
We'll-
Again, from the town council perspective, they felt that the Counselor Corner Live was extremely positive and productive in terms of the next steps for the school, and are looking to collaborate again in the future with the board for another Counselor Corner Live. Jenna will be working with their communications committee. They are working on a general communication strategy, generally, but also in regard to the building committee. They're looking for a cohesive plan between the two bodies. They are beginning an ad hoc open space committee. There is not a school rep on that committee, but it's something worth paying attention to and providing feedback if we have it. And and then there was a conversation about changing some of the hospitality units and I assume the hotels in the Payne Road area to multifamily units. And so right now there's an unknown that's just a conversation that's getting going. It doesn't necessarily mean it will go anywhere, but of course, we'll have an interest on how that'll impact our schools. Yes, and that's it, I think.
Yeah. I happened to be at the town council meeting when they started discussing the hotels. It's an interesting idea, but I do think we would be remiss if we didn't consider what this means for Scarborough because housing is so expensive. So the idea behind it is that they would take hotel rooms and turn them into one-bedroom efficiency units for affordable housing, which of course, is something I think all of Maine is in need of desperately is affordable housing. But what I'm hoping doesn't get lost in the conversation is that because there is a lack of affordable housing, that it's very much, it wouldn't be to me out of the norm to have a parent or two parents and a child living in a efficiency apartment.
Yeah.
And so just because these are considered to be one bedrooms, that doesn't mean we won't have an impact on the school side. And so it's something for us to kind of keep in mind as we watch it. And the idea is that, as I understood it in the meeting, is that the process that town council follows is that they vote, or they discuss and vote to send something to planning. And then planning is who will take a good look at the logistics of it. What is the impact? What is the cost? all of the things that surround it. And then bring it back to the town council for a vote. So this doesn't mean that it's a for sure thing. It just means they're, to what Jillian said, they're just discussing at this point and doing the due diligence work.
So I had a question back on the pre-K.
Mm,
So I don't know who's the best one to answer it. So is that going to be funded state or local or a bit of both? How's that work?
So, when we confirmed this and went through everything, I mean, first of all, the state for any preschool, subsidy amounts, you get 100% of that subsidy regardless of whether you're a high receiver, low receiver, that kind of thing. So, and the amount of, so with this partnership, the subsidy that we would receive from the state, and it's already kind of factored into our draft for the Ed 279s for 16 students that that we have space for, that amount of money from the state would more than cover the expenses from the partnership. So,
Right.
so it won't be impacted for this, for FY25 budget. There's no ask for that
Great.
to the local taxpayer, which is nice.
We did, the DOE did release today a memo about, do you want to go ahead? You wanna
Yeah,
talk about
yeah.
it?
So on the legislative front, I
Yeah.
think we would be remiss in not highlighting what Governor Mills released during her State of the Union, State of
the
Maine,
State.
State of the State address earlier this week. Should have written like an oral portion. But the Department of Education floated a plan. It's been floated a few times in the past, specifically to transition services that are when Child Development Services, which is the organization through DHHS that currently services children between the ages of 3 and 5 before they enter kindergarten. But if they're identified early as being delayed or requiring special services, which can range from some speech therapy, OT, PT, all the way, the whole gamut to a full suite of services, depending on their needs. Transitioning that from currently state oversight with CDS to the local school district. This plan is more, again, it's been floated many, many times in the past. It was one of Governor Mills's priorities earlier on in per tenure. But in this, it's become a little bit more realistic because the federal government is now investigating Maine's delivery of these services through CDS. There's been a couple of reports and newspaper articles that have highlighted some of the really critical shortfalls in the current process, specifically the wait lists for kids needing services, sometimes having to wait years for those services. And if you're talking about 3 and 4-year-olds, they don't have years because they're going to enter the school district usually at 5, although that's slightly variable. So I think what the takeaway is, generally in a biennial budget, which is our budget, the first year is the one to watch. It's when most of the new bills come in. That was last year. This year is the supplemental budget, which is technically reserved for emergency legislation. So there's usually fewer things to watch. However, this bill coming in at this time means that we do need to watch it. And the 2 things that I'm really concerned about is the funding source for these services, because they're extremely expensive. And almost as critical is we are currently having difficulty staffing all of our special ed services through ed techs. We would be required to locate and have services for these children who desperately need it and deserve it, by the way. Like these are really important services and they need to be delivered efficiently and effectively. But we would be tasked with making sure that there are sufficient service hours of OTs, PTs, and a variety of other therapies for a number of children as they're identified, which again is expensive. There's a shortage of services that are available. There's no realistic plan that the school district has in reserve OTs and PTs to meet the need, and using them because they're easy. There's a variety of services, but there's no like reserve pool of them that Scarborough or any other school district has hidden behind a door that we're going to trot out to service these children. The state has not created an infrastructure to deliver these services effectively, which is why there's such a problem right now. I mean, essentially, it's going to push the problem into the local school districts, including ours. But it's something we should watch. There's space issues because a lot of these children do go to pre-K or nursery school or preschool programs. They're developmentally appropriate. But again, there is a lot of infrastructure that is required to support the needs of these children. We want to support our children in Scarborough, all of them. But this is a huge burden. It's not just expenses, it's also an enormous administrative burden that's going to be tasked on this board and on this district.
Yeah, and this is where I was gonna go with the question. So kind of combining the pre-K that we're looking at with this. So what I'm not quite clear on is if you read through the release, it looks like there's funding for 1 year, but it's 10 million that looks like it covers the whole state. So I don't really, I'm not quite sure how that intersects with the money we would be getting. But then it appears that there's another pot set aside for renovations for schools that are looking to start, but that pot doesn't seem sufficient either. So it's $4 million. But again, it looks like that's for the whole state. And we just have gone through a budget process with the new school and $4 million doesn't scratch the surface. So for ours. So I feel like there's a definite, this is going to be a definite burden, but also how do we, if we can only handle 16 kids, what happens to the rest?
Well, I mean, they're going to continue, they're going to continue. I mean, students on IEPs have to receive services. And so it's not going to be just you throw a switch and now we've got public preschool and all the kids are
Right.
in classrooms. I mean, that ultimately is the vision. And as I think the memo was trying to point out, it's not like you have to have a public option preschool for all of your preschool age kids in your local community. That's not the expectation, but you are turning over, in the least restrictive environment possible, services for students who are in CDS, and the best way to do that is in a preschool classroom setting if possible. Now, not all communities have that or even the space for that, and Scarborough certainly fits that category. But having partnerships like this one where we can at least start and have a preschool option for 16 seats is a beginning. So It's good timing in that way, because they're setting this kind of like 3-year window where it's, after 3 years, it will be transitioned over to local schools, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're gonna have, you know, a preschool option for all students.
Well, I just would imagine there's more than 16 in Scarborough that require special services that would
Definitely.
qualify. And so
Right.
that's where I'm not, if this turns over, what happens to
I-
those kids?
Well, here's what happens. Right
Yeah.
now, there's not enough people to service the children that exist in the system. There are not enough people who are specialized to do all the services that are required. Right now, CDS sends services into kids' homes. We would be required to send services into children's homes starting at 3 if they qualify. That's OT, PT, speech. If there's support necessary to accommodate a child, you would have to provide that service wherever necessary and appropriate. We would also likely have to contract with a number of special schools in the area who do specialize in children who have significant needs. As the parent of a child who qualified for these services, I, again, want to make sure that every child who needs them gets the services they need. That's really important. But I also don't want people to underestimate the difficulty and expense that's going to come with that this town is going to have to account for, whether or not the state funds it or doesn't fund it. If it becomes our responsibility, we will have to pay the tuition that's required and the services. And again, I believe these services need to be delivered. These are required. These children deserve the very best, and every child needs to have what they need in order to access education and to grow. I'm not anti that at all, but I also want people to be eyes wide open. But if it becomes our responsibility, we will have to deliver that service.
Yeah, and to that, Freyla, that's why, you know, we were having a lot of similar conversations about this 8 years ago, 9 years ago. And, you know, so that's been the challenge. I mean, all these things that you're describing.
And leadership changes and turns over, right? So just because you have one governor that is
Right.
willing to fund, doesn't mean the next governor is, right? And so you can have a governor that is unwilling to fund it at the state level, and then it truly is a local responsibility.
And let's not even talk about that. We've had budget surpluses for the last few
Mhm.
years, which have been enormous. And,
Mhm.
you know, there've been a lot of opportunities that come with budget surpluses, but I don't think anybody who lived in the 10 years before that and remembers the budget deficits that went on for a decade and the sort of financial decisions that had to be made at that time to underestimate what it means, you know, this, we do not always have budget surpluses. You cannot
Right.
rely on that. And when there are not budget surpluses and programs are being cut, if we are required to deliver these services by statute, we will be sued if we don't. So we have to provide them. We will be required to, whether or not we can find qualified people to fill the service positions, whether or not we can afford it, not whether or not, you know, it's going to become a local conversation. But
Mhm.
again, it's one of those things when we talk about things we would like to provide and the things that we are mandated to provide, these are firmly in the mandated category. So that, just so people are clear. And again, I'm not anti providing services to children. I had a personal stake in this. I had a child with CDS from the time she was born practically. And I would fight anybody for the services she needs. And I would expect most parents to would do that. But I want to be very clear. It's going to be a very expensive and also administratively burdensome process.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. I also wouldn't say, you know, I'm certainly not, just like you, I'm not against providing services that are required and needed, but want to just be sure we're doing it in a responsible way. Mhm. All right, any other questions for Freyla, well, not for Freyla, I'm sorry, for Jillian, for the pre-K? All right, I was not at the district emergency management team meeting, so would you mind, Jeff, providing an update? I was unable to attend.
What were we talking about?
I'm all for
We-
putting everyone on the spot tonight.
We actually, the second half of it, it was good because we were able to, we split up into small groups and just really talked about kind of where we've been and where we're going for this year. And part of it was we actually had a gentleman who's from through Homeland Security actually do a physical security audit and visit of the high school and go through all the different layers of physical security in the building from the exterior envelope all the way down to the classrooms. And he was, and it was myself, Diane was there, Nate and Jake and Mike Beeler. Also, our fire chief was there, as well as another, I think the deputy chief as well. And really, first of all, there's a lot of things about our building that are very well designed, from just the doors and the archways to the classrooms, to the walls, to the number of cameras and just the technology as well. So that was nice. And he just had like a lot of suggestions too, just about process and emergency procedures and all those kind of things. And actually, we're talking with him in particular about having him do a same kind of audit for, in particular, our 3 K-2 primary schools, where there are some, I think, legitimate safety and security concerns, just based on the front entrances and how those buildings are designed and outdated. So we're talking about the potential of that, and then we're also just talking about continuing to revise and review all of our emergency procedures. One of which we highlighted was just the increased prevalence of the swatting threats that towns have received in Maine over the course of the past year, and coming up with potentially, some more just protocols in place to respond to that kind of an event specifically. But it was good. It was just a good kind of review on where we are, and also an opportunity to talk about Raptor and other things, but then also meet in small groups on where we want to go for next time.
Perfect, thank you. And our next meeting is March 27th.
Yes,
Yes.
I'm gonna go with yes on that one.
Yes. All right. Are there any other liaison reports or any other questions? Agenda item 11.0 are student representative reports. So I'll turn this to Colby.
All right, so at the high school, in a thrilling double overtime game, the boys varsity basketball team beat Bonnie Eagle last week, scoring 57 points over Bonnie Eagle's 48. Sure was pretty intense with the double overtime. And then at the primary schools, kids from all 3 of the primary schools had fun playing in the snow this week. 8 corner students made paper snowflakes to hang from the ceilings. And junior achievement volunteers from across the community visited Pleasant Hill to teach the second graders about roles, responsibilities, and occupations within a community. In the bottom picture are proud 4th grade goal scorers from Wentworth's Floor Hockey Club. That's all I have.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Colby. Any questions for Colby? Thank you. All right, agenda item 12.0 is old business. 12.1 is the second reading of policy AD, educational philosophy and mission.
All right, so for the policies that we are going through now, there are not substantive changes to them. There was not a lot of feedback at the meeting that we discussed them or afterwards. And so at our last meeting, we went through them pretty quick. I'll just remind everybody about what they were. AD is the educational philosophy and mission. This really points to, it's some general language about how the board wants to advocate for children to make sure that there's an educational environment for, necessary to support every student And then we point to our, I keep calling it the strategic plan, but it's actually called something else. Sorry, district-wide plan that's on our website and sort of guides. I went through this long last time. I'm not going to do the whole thing spiel again, but our comprehensive educational plan, which really goes through our goals as a district. And as I said last time, my goal is to make our policies congruent with our planning documents so that they're supportive of one another. So that's the educational philosophy and mission.
All right. Do I have a motion to approve the second reading of policy AD, educational philosophy and mission?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All right, can we call the vote, please?
Mrs. Gammon,
Yes.
Ms. Castellanos,
Yes.
Ms. Leong,
Yes.
Mrs. Lindstrom,
Yes.
Ms. Tarpinian,
Yes.
Mr. Peony Huff,
Yes.
and Mr. Shumway.
Yes.
Perfect, it's unanimous, thank you. Agenda item 12.2 is the second reading of policy ADA, school district goals and objectives.
Again, this is one that we went through last time. This is a very short, it's a very short policy that just says that we'll set goals to make our school district operate efficiently. And we'll adopt whatever policies are necessary to accomplish our goals. So,
Perfect, thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the second reading of policy ADA, school district goals and objectives?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All right, can we call the vote, please?
Mrs. Gammon,
Yes.
Ms. Castellanos,
yes.
Ms. Leong,
Yes.
Mrs. Lindstrom,
Yes.
Ms. Tarpinian,
Yes.
Mr. Peony Huff,
Yes.
and Mr. Shumway.
Yes.
Perfect, it's unanimous, thank you. Agenda item 12.3 is the second reading of policy ADF, school district commitment to learning results.
This is almost entirely an unchanged model policy because it is a mandated policy through the Department of Education and statute. It requires us to adopt the main system's learning results, including the guiding principles. And so this is the policy that we use to do that.
Perfect, do I have a motion to approve the second reading of policy ADF, school district commitment to learning results?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All right, can we call the vote, please?
Mrs. Gammon,
Yes.
Ms. Castellanos,
Yes.
Ms. Leong,
Yes.
Mrs. Lindstrom,
Yes.
Ms. Tarpinian,
Yes.
Mr. Peony Huff.
Yeah.
And Mr. Shumway.
Yes.
Thank you, it's unanimous. Agenda item 12.4 is the second reading of policy BBA, school board powers and responsibilities.
Otherwise known as the 30,000-foot view policy. This is again, a very short policy, but it just says that the school board is in charge of the public school district and exercises responsibilities as required by law. It talks about how we will concern ourselves primarily with broad questions of policy and not the administrative details. And other than that, we will follow the law. So we will function within the framework of state, local, and federal laws, which I commit to doing.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the second reading of policy BBA, school board powers and responsibilities?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Can we call the vote, please?
Ms. Gammon,
Yes.
Ms. Castellanos,
Yes.
Ms. Leong,
Yes.
Mrs. Lindstrom,
Yes.
Ms. Tarpinian,
Yes.
Mr. Peony Huff,
Yes.
Mr. Shumway.
Yes.
Perfect, it's unanimous. Thank you. Agenda item 13.0 is new business. 13.1 is the first reading of policy BEDB, the agenda.
All right, so this is a new policy, although we have discussed it kind of at length, not at our last meeting, but the meeting before that. The first policy or part of the policy BEBD has not changed. It talks about how we have an agenda, which is required under open meeting laws. And it talks about the format. The format is where the changes are coming into effect. That is the next section of the policy. It's BEBDR. In this case, it's just the basic rules that we follow and how an agenda comes together, which is the superintendent and the board chair prepare the agenda. In order to get something added to the agenda, the request either from a board member or the public would come through the chair or the superintendent, and then they would make the final decision about what gets put on the agenda. There's some timing requirements in there, so typically you have to give public notice 3 days in advance of any meeting, including posting the agenda. This is a policy that says we'll do that. It also talks about how we will, all the supplemental materials that we reference in the agenda is also posted 3 days in advance so that members of the public, the board and anyone else who's interested, can make them, they're available so they can read them and if they have comment or whatever, other can come to the meeting and make that comment. Other than that, it talks about how additions and adjustments are made to the agenda. It's a pretty basic policy. It's a pretty standard procedure of, it generally follows Robert's Rules of Order and how agendas are created and edited. And then complies with the meeting laws requiring now that we publish agendas and meeting materials ahead of time. Happy to take any questions. It's what we've been doing, so.
Bless you. Bless you. All right, do I have a motion to approve the first reading of policy BEDB agenda?
So moved.
Second. Is there any discussion? Yeah. Yeah.
Tongue twister.
Can we,
Yeah.
can we call the vote, please?
Mrs. Gammon,
Yes.
Ms. Casalonis,
Yes.
Ms. Leong,
Yes.
Mrs. Lindstrom,
Yes.
Ms. Tarpinian,
Yes.
Mr. Peony House.
Yes.
Mr. Shumway.
Yes.
All right, the motion passes. Thank you. Agenda item 13.2 is the first reading of policy BEDDR agenda format. Is that right? BEDBR agenda format.
I just had this tongue twister. So this is a great policy, not just because we drafted it, but because it's referenced in BEDB, and then we couldn't find it. So now it exists, which
Yes.
is exciting. This does change how our meetings would be conducted because it changes how we go through the agenda at meetings. Specifically, the format is the order of what we would do remains the same, which is a call to meeting to order, pledge of allegiance, minute approval, recognition, public comment, the superintendent report, the chair report, committee liaison, student reports, continuing business, new business, and then announcements and executive session if necessary and adjournment. That is the order that we have been following. The changes that are made is that general public comment would be a period of comment reserved for topics not in the existing agenda item and would be consistent with school board education meeting norms, which is defined below. So that way a member of the public could come in and talk about any subject, not just subjects that are on the agenda. They would be required to comply with our norms, which is that every member of the public can talk on every topic for up to 3 minutes. And then it should cease when the chair calls for that and that Robert Rules of Orders govern the proceedings. What it does is it changes that, the major change is that there would be a public comment period available at each agenda item. So what it would look like is if something is introduced, so for example, BEDB was introduced a moment ago. We would open up a meeting, public comment opportunity for that policy. So that way the public could give comment on that topic and then we would motion to open that and then we would have our discussion and it would happen all at the same time. This is consistent with how the town council runs their meetings, but is a change from how the school board has operated previously. Happy to take any questions, but those are the major, that's the change and that was what the document would do.
All right, do I have a motion to approve the first reading of policy BEDBR agenda format?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? I have just one question. Do you think it, and sorry, because
That's what,
sometimes I do this, even though I sit in policy with you, but here I am asking a question.
that is good.
So the public comment period, do you think that we should spell out, or I'm thinking we should spell out that public comment period will be opened as each new agenda item is introduced. So new business agenda item? Right, because we talked about not taking comment on
The
old
Pledge of
items.
Allegiance.
Right, like
Or-
like we're just focused on the new business
Yeah,
items.
I think that makes sense. I'm gonna actually make a.
Yeah.
I'm
But
actually
you
gonna
wouldn't
make a
want it
change.
on old, where you just want it on like the first reading of a policy as opposed to the second.
Well, because old business is, old business is reserved for things that we've already discussed and we're bringing back. And so I would have said yes until you just said that, because now I'm like, because what if we make a change?
Yeah.
Right, and it comes back for
Well-
second reading and now we've made a change.
I mean, you could do it for the whole section of old business.
Yeah.
For
I'm gonna
any,
disregard my thing now. Yeah, I wouldn't have. Yeah.
well, I think, I think it makes sense to, again, we're not gonna open up public comment for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Right.
So, or approval of the meeting minutes, like there's some basic stuff that we wouldn't, and this would actually contemplate opening up and asking for public comment in each of
Mhm.
those, which I think is unnecessary. So I think we could limit it to business. Okay, so so a public comment period will be opened up at continuing business and new business
Mm-hmm.
instead of every point of the agenda. I think
Right.
that's a fair, I think that's a fair addition. It's easy to make.
And we don't have public comment at workshops, right? Or, no.
We
okay.
haven't.
No, we haven't been.
They can come and do general public comment though,
Yeah, they could come in.
after.
Right, yeah.
Okay. I
Alright.
support for this suggestion.
Really Shannon's suggestion. I just molded it.
Thank you for molding for me. Is there any other questions or comments? Oh,
Just-
Leanne's got her hand raised.
Yeah, just one. If it's being worded the same way that town council is, would that still give folks an opportunity to make public comment on committee updates? And I'm thinking specifically building, like the building committee. That's gonna be a topic that people may want to talk about, and it's not really new business. It's one of those gray areas.
Mm-hmm.
We could open up general public comment before we opened up continuing business. So we could move the public comment period from the very beginning of the meeting. So right now, it's number 6, between recognition and superintendent's report, and we could drop it underneath the committee liaison and student reports. So we would have a period of general public comment that would be after those committee reports for anybody to talk about anything that's not on the agenda technically. And that way, would that cover that? Would that address that situation?
It did until you said items not covered on the agenda. Because those committee reports are part of the agenda.
Well, I mean,
Why don't we just make it a general
yeah.
comment
general-
on anything?
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
general
you.
Public comment.
Okay. I will mark this up and send it out, just so everyone knows,
Yeah.
before second reading, and we'll do that in policy, I think.
Thank you, Leanne. Are there any other questions or comments? All right. Can we call the vote, please?
Mrs. Gammon,
Yes.
Ms. Castellanos,
Yes.
Ms. Leong,
Yes.
Mrs. Lindstrom,
Yes.
Ms. Tarpinian,
Yes.
Mr. Peony Huff,
Yes.
Mr. Shumway.
Yes.
Perfect, it's unanimous. Thank you. Agenda item 13.3 is an appointment of a high school varsity softball coach.
Yeah, and it's in your last page of the packet, Mr. Brian Rice.
Do I have a motion to approve the appointment of a high school varsity softball coach as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All right, can we call the vote?
Mrs. Gammon,
Yes.
Ms. Castellanos,
Yes.
Ms. Leong,
Yes.
Mrs. Lindstrom,
Yes.
Ms. Tarpinian,
Yes.
Mr. Peony Huff,
Yeah.
and Mr. Shumway.
Thank you, it's unanimous. Agenda item 14.0 is adjournment. Do I have a motion to
So
adjourn?
moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion?
Well,
Can we call the vote, please?
Mrs. Gammon,
Yes.
Ms. Castellanos,
Yes.
Ms. Leong,
Yes.
Mrs. Lindstrom,
Yes.
Ms. Tarpinian,
Yes.
Mr. Peony Huff,
Yes.
and Mr. Shumway.
Perfect. Thank you, it's unanimous. Have a good evening.